Hey guys, Dean here. In today's video I'm going to be running you through how I plan to read 50 books this year and the tips and tricks I've been using to read a little bit more in the previous years and reach my reading goals. Now a lot of people like me either don't have time to read or they want more incentive to read more, so a few of these tips which I'm going to share, which I've personally used, will help you prioritize reading and be more productive with your reading. If you want to check out this whole productive workspace and desk setup, I will leave the link down below. You can check out why I use this desk and how it helps me reading too. Without further ado, I'm going to jump into a few different points. So the first one is I recommend actually getting yourself a Kindle. Now I bought this new Kindle probably a few weeks ago. I did previously have an older Kindle model, but the reason why I upgraded to a new one is because it actually has a backlight built inside of it. This is perfect for when I go to sleep and I don't need the light on, and I can actually illuminate the Kindle and read the book with ease. The reason why this Kindle is so great is because obviously a Kindle has internal storage, so you can store so many books inside of one device, and it means that you don't take up much space. Now as you can see, currently my Kindle needs charging. I don't think you can actually see the display right now, but this is the internal light, okay? And if I turn it off by pressing the button down here, you can see the screen will go off, and you can see this is how it normally looks. So this Kindle personally has an internal light inside, which I really think helps with reading. Now the reason why the Kindle is so good is not only can you store tons of books in there, but it's very easy to access books. For an example, if you go to the library, you would have to go to the library to get a new book, but on your Kindle, you can buy an ebook straight off Amazon through the Kindle, which is integrated into the whole website, or you can download a book online that's free, or a book that you already own, or some kind of PDF file and transfer it straight onto the Kindle. Now I heard of some kind of study or some kind of group data suggesting that people who actually own Kindles actually read a lot more. I think it was like 20 to 40%. Apparently people who own Kindles actually read a whole bunch more than normal books. Now I don't actually own many material books or real books. Every book that I have is basically digital and it's stored on my Kindle. Now you can see this book, which I featured in one of my videos on my productive workspace. This is a drawing book, okay? So this isn't fiction, this isn't any kind of factual book. This is a drawing book which I have just to basically do sketches and get better at drawing. This is the only book I really think I own. I think I probably can count the amount of real physical books that I own now on one hand. And that's because when I actually invested in a Kindle, I actually threw away most of my books because now I can just go ahead and download them. And the great thing about the Kindle is any book that you buy directly from Amazon, a lot of them support you also getting the digital version of that for free. So a few books which I bought in the past, which were really thick, big books, I can actually go ahead and download the digital versions of those straight to my Kindle for free because I've already bought them. And that's nice because it meant that I could actually throw them away and get some space, because I don't really have space for a full bookcase and I like to be as minimalistic as I can. So I'd recommend getting a Kindle if you haven't already, because books are a lot more accessible, it's a lot easier to read on a Kindle, and also you can change the sizes of the text, and there's some really great accessibility and options for different font sizes, and you can customize it how you like, and there's also a built-in light in there. So I think it just promotes reading because everything's really easy and there's not really any screen glare. And the screen is designed so it's actually easy on your eyes. So it basically feels, in my personal opinion, just like reading a normal book. Now the next tip is to make a daily and monthly reading goal. Now the only thing really that helped me actually read more, because I was struggling with it, is actually making a daily and monthly read goal. Now I don't always reach the daily goal because sometimes I don't read every single day, admittedly, but what helped was to set two different goals, the daily and the monthly one. So for each day, I told myself that I have to read at least 10% of the current book that I'm reading. Obviously if the book's huge and it's a few hundred pages, it's a lot harder to actually read 10% of that book in a day. But if it was a small book that was only maybe 200 pages, it was really easy for me to read 10% of that book a day. Now you won't be able to tell the percentage of the amount of the book that you're actually reading, yet again, unless you own a Kindle. Now I can't show you a close-up shot right now because this Kindle's on really low battery, but the good thing about a Kindle as well, going back to our previous point, is it tells you the time left that you've got in the book based on the current speed that you're reading. So if I've been reading 5 pages every 30 seconds, for an example, which sounds ridiculous, then it'll tell me how many hours left I have in that book reading at that current pace, which is really nice. But it also tells me the percentage that I am at in the book too. So it says here on my current book, I'm 58% in. So I'd say I need to read 10%, and by the end of my reading session, I should be at 68%. So that was my personal target for a daily reading goal. And my old target for a monthly reading goal was to read one book at least a month. So you can set how many books you want to read and maybe the percentage of the book that you want to get through during each session to make sure you actually hit your targets. And that was a really helpful tip for me. Now, one book a month obviously equals 12 books a year, and that's a very easy reading goal to actually reach for most people. Even though I'm aiming for a much larger number than that this year, 12 books a year was a pretty easy goal to actually hit in the previous years for me, which was actually my goal last year to do. Now, probably the most important tip that I can give you, which I personally don't always follow, and something which I'm having a little bit of trouble myself actually following, is to read something you actually enjoy and cut out the classics. Now, I've seen a few people recommend this, and I couldn't agree more, which is why I decided to reshare this point too. Now, personally, I'm currently reading a book called The 48 Laws of Power, and I find this book really interesting, okay? It has a lot of material which is really interesting to learn about and gain some insight into, and kind of understand certain people's behaviour, and I find this philosophy book actually really good to read. The only problem is I've picked it up and put it down a numerous amount of times, and this is because it's a really short-winded book in terms of I can't read too much of it in one time. It's kind of a book which I like to read in short bursts. I don't get bored of it, it just seems quite overwhelming at different points, and also it uses a lot of different examples, multiple, to explain one point, and it kind of seems like too much sometimes that the author tries to fit into one book. And this is why the book is really huge and has so many pages in it. And sometimes I feel a little bit demotivated to read this, and if I put down the book and read something else, I'd probably be a lot more motivated to hit every single reading goal which I have, and I'd probably read a lot more books in a shorter time span. But I've set this kind of mental goal where I want to finish this book and get to the end of it no matter what. And that's because I know that I don't dislike the book, but I know that I can't read too much of it in one day. So there's kind of a conflict of interest there. I would also say on the flip side that one of the best tips I can give is if you don't feel the motivation to finish a book, or if you know you dislike it, but you want to make sure it gets ticked off and disappears from your currently reading section on your Kindle, or just to say you finished it, think about possibly considering skipping that book if you know you're not going to finish it, or if it's slowing down your reading progress. Because sometimes there's nothing wrong with just dodging a book if you personally don't like it. For an example, if people say it's a classic and it's a really well-reviewed book, it might not actually be for you and you might not like it, and people have different tastes, so that's okay. So despite the rating, don't feel afraid to drop books which you're not really too invested in. It doesn't matter about bragging to your friends that you've read a certain book if you didn't enjoy it, because you're not going to be able to speak about it with much enthusiasm anyway. Now, another thing that I see a lot of people doing when I've been watching a lot of these productivity reading videos, because obviously I've done a little bit of research, which is where I got a lot of my original tips from before I started using them myself. Now, one big tip which people seem to use, and this is people usually who read a lot of business books or factual books, which I personally enjoy, that is people who skim the books. Now, personally, this isn't for me. I've never really been someone who can just jump in, highlight a few words, get what I want from that page and just skip everything else on that page and just kind of skim through the book, because I like to sit down and finish a book even if it takes me a long time to do. But there's nothing wrong with skimming through a book. It's not a crime. Like I said before, if you're not 100% motivated to finish the book, but there's still some good points you can learn from it, or if you want to just skim through it to see if it has good content in, to let you know if you want to read it in full from front to back, it can actually be good just to skim through and have a look what the book's contents are it's offering to you. So you could skim through, use a highlighter or a marker pen, and underline some of the more interesting parts of the video which appeal to you, and maybe certain quotes or passages which you want to go back and read again. So skimming can let you know if you want to actually complete that book and read it in full. It kind of gives you a little sneak peek of the content in it, and it also lets you find the key points and then move on to another book. Personally, it's not for me, but a lot of people do get a lot of benefit from skimming through a book and getting the key facts out of it. So whether you want to skim or not, or if you want to read it in full, one good tip along with this, which I slightly just mentioned there, was to get a notepad and pen, or maybe if you're on a laptop like what I've got next to me, and either use a highlighter pen or a marker like I said before, or type on your laptop in maybe a notepad document or a Word document and type some of the key points summarizing the book and write them down so you actually memorize them. You could also write your own summary of the book and all of its contents and the key points which you actually learned from it, and that's also a great point to actually remember things. This is mainly just for factual books or business books, for an example, books on things like finance. It's not really that great for fiction because you're not really reading a fiction to learn information. you're reading a fiction book basically for entertainment purposes. Now, one thing I recommend too, which is something which I've taken full advantage of and benefited off myself, is making an account on GoodReads. Now, this is fully integrated into the Kindle device, okay? Now, I first learned about GoodReads when I actually first purchased my Kindle, and basically it's a website which you can log into through your Kindle, and you can learn about brand new books on and do book reviews and read other people's book reviews. So this is a good website which you should basically take full advantage out of. And the reason why this is a good website is there's reading lists which are submitted by the community of each genre of book. So if you like a crime book or a thriller type book, for an example, you can look at different categories of people's ideas for the best books in those categories, and you can learn about some really good books. Also, based on the books which you've read and reviewed, it will give you a whole list of recommendations of similar books based on your preference. So I think if you read somewhere between 10 and 20 books, I believe it's 10, it will start to give you recommendations of what it thinks you'll like based on what you've already read. So it's a good book for discovery of new material that you might want to read, and it's also fun because it gives you something to look forward to when you're going through a book and when you've nearly finished it. It gives you more motivation to finish a book because you know that you can go onto GoodReads and write a review about it and do a write-up of why you enjoyed the book and what's so good about it. So it's a community you can join in, it's somewhere you can gain recommendations from, and also a place to write really cool reviews from, and it's a load of fun. Now, if you have a Kindle, like I said, it'll be fully integrated and you can make use of it, or you can just make an account and use it on the computer like I have in the past. Now, it's not really on the whole topic of reading because we're mainly talking about reading here, reading the words of a book and reading a proper hardback book or a digital ebook. But reading or listening to an audiobook can also sometimes be beneficial, especially long-winded books, like I said before, that you want to learn about or you want to read and gain material from, but you lack motivation to maybe finish it in written form that you have to read. Audiobooks can actually be beneficial for this too. And it's really good to alleviate the pressure of actually having to read, or if you want to multitask and maybe play a video game or do something like working at the same time, listening to an audiobook lets you basically gain a lot of information from these really long-winded books which you might not want to personally read or don't have enough time to dedicate to. So there's nothing wrong with listening to an audiobook. It doesn't really give you some of the benefits of reading. There's a lot of different mental bonuses and benefits to your mind and brain from actually reading proper written material, but it's always good to use audiobooks sparingly when you can, and they can be really helpful. Now, I haven't used audiobooks too much, but I did make an account on audible.com by clicking on someone's link to a trial recently, and I did get 2 books on there. I am trying to go through the 4-hour work week right now because everyone seems to recommend it, and I have been enjoying it, but I have found it quite beneficial to read some of those books via audiobook form because they're kind of books which I'm not 100% sure if I'd want to read in full if I was reading from a hardback book. I would recommend Audible though, I have actually enjoyed it. I will leave a link down below which you can click to get a free trial to Audible and 2 books if you want to check that out. But I'm basically just new and getting into it right now, but I think it's something which I do actually enjoy. Now personally I do like to read books, but when I lack time, Audible has been something which I can sit down and listen to when I'm doing something. Now let's talk about concentration when you're reading and making sure that you actually get a lot of information from what you're reading and you don't forget about it or let it slip by whilst you're reading. So when I read a book, a lot of times I either suddenly lack concentration in the moment or forget about what I've just read if I'm skimming through it too quickly. And one thing I like to do to kind of counteract this thing is I like to mouth the words as I'm reading it. If there's something like a complex word or a passage which is kind of long-winded or has a lot of information in one block, I like to mouth the words as I actually read them because it actually kind of gives my brain the affirmation that it's something that I need to take note of or to actually pay attention to. So mouthing the words can actually sometimes make it a lot easier to remember things and gain concentration on the content that you're actually reading easier. Now the next tip is to get a quiet area to read in or set up a quiet area that promotes reading or productivity work. So this desk setup right here, I do have a video on it called My Productivity Desk Setup 2021. I'll leave that link down below and on the side if you want to check that out. But basically the whole purpose of setting up this second desk is because I have a lot of procrastination problems when I'm on my main gaming setup because I get distracted by YouTube videos or games if I'm playing them, and sometimes I need to be more productive, and I would say I'm very productive throughout the day. I do lack productivity in certain areas, and one of them was reading. So this This desk helps me kind of break away from that and do a little bit of reading or drawing or things that I probably should be dedicating more time to, and I'd recommend you to do that too. The only ways to do this is find an area where you can disconnect from the computer, maybe a living room that's quiet, or if you have a house with a study or a library, if you have a big house for an example, or basically just an empty vacant room that lets you read without distraction, and it really makes reading a lot easier when you can do it in peace. And sometimes if you have a phone and you're messaging people at the same time, or if you have notifications from so many different apps, for an example, sometimes I'll get messages from my friends, or sometimes I get countless notifications from apps which I haven't disabled the notifications for, and if you're reading a book, you have that fast track mindset where you want to quickly shift your attention away to your phone and check what your phone's notifying you about. Maybe it's an important message you have to reply to, or maybe it's an app giving you an update that you need to check. Basically, disabling your notifications on your phone and jumping back to them later can make it a lot easier to concentrate and finish your reading session. For an example, if you want to read half an hour a day, you don't need the distraction of certain devices distracting you from that 30-minute window. If something's important enough, then you'll get notified via a different method, or if it's not, you can get back to it after your 30-minute reading window, for an example. Now, the next one is obviously obtaining books. Now, if you're not in the digital age and Kindles don't really meet your requirements, or you're not really bothered about digital devices, or you don't think a Kindle would be something you're interested in, which I personally think everyone could benefit from, then you can definitely join the local library and get a library card. When I was younger, I always used to go to the library. Like I said, now I don't really like to have a lot of books laying around in my room. I don't really like to store them, and I don't really like to go to libraries because in the past I forgot about taking library books back and I've had to pay a small fine or a fee, or I had certain similar problems like that. So I don't currently go to the library, and I'm not a member of the local library anymore, but I definitely benefited off it when I was in school and needed to get a certain book for my classes to study with, especially English, where we had to go out and source a specific book, which usually you could get from the school library, which you can use for the same purpose. But the local council library is also really beneficial too, because you can get free books and you can also get cheap books on sale too if the library is selling them. Now, if you don't have much money to buy books and you don't have a Kindle, it's really cool to go to the library because you can basically get anything, and a lot of the time you can also do a request to ask them to buy a book for you and get it in through the library, and you can make an order in most libraries on their software to see if another library has the book but your library's missing, and then you can order it in the next few weeks to book it out yourself. So there's a really cool number of systems in the library that are on offer for you to get free books and get new books into the library that they don't currently have. So I'd recommend using your library and your library card if you read in hardback books or paperback books. Now, as for obtaining books, another tip is to look for discount books or books that are on sale. This works for the library too. We've bought countless books and DVDs from the libraries in their clearance sections, but this is also generally just for bookshops too. So in the UK, that would be something like Waterstones, and in other countries like Barnes & Noble or WH Smith in the UK, for an example. These places sell a lot of books, and sometimes they have some clearance sections with some really good books that they want to get rid of or sell, and you can also discover some really good new books in these sections too. Probably the best store in the UK for cheap books and discount books, which I recommend, is The Works. They have The Works in most cities and towns, and it's a really good place that I've got a lot of great books from in the past. Now, the last and final tip for this video is get a partner to actually keep you accountable for reading with. It's something which I'd really recommend, and I've seen on a lot of other videos people actually using, and it was really great for them to read more. This is basically just to get a partner who will read with you, or someone that can remind you to read. So for an example, this could obviously be a partner, or it could be a best friend, for an example, or you could even join something like a book club. That could be either in real life or it could be virtual online. There's a lot of different forums, Reddit websites, and different websites, and communities like GoodReads, for an example, which I mentioned earlier. You could get a contact with someone that you know or online, and you could read the same book. It's really cool if you have a reading partner. I mean, for an example, some of my friends in the past, they've shown me new books, or they felt motivated to read, and then it's made me feel motivated to read because I haven't read in a while, or I've not met my personal reading goals, and it's kind of kicked me off to start reading again. And even if you read a different book, it's nice that you can then talk about each other's book or the same book that you're both reading, and it's kind of like another connection experience too. So it's really cool to have a reading partner, and it's really cool to do that with friends. So these are my tips on how I plan to read more this year, and tips that I used in the past to read around 12 books a year last year personally. So if you like this video, make sure to click the like button and subscribe, and click the videos down below like my desk setup if you want to check out some more videos on the channel.